On July 16th, 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, then part of the Holy Roman Empire, it was unbearably hot. The heat was suffocating. People were sweating through their clothes, and they tried not to go out unless there was no other choice. And then suddenly, a woman stepped out into the street and began to dance. We know very, very little about this strange woman. Her name was Trophaea. That is practically all we know. But how much has been written about her, about the way she suddenly started to dance right there in the middle of the city. And it was not a game, not entertainment, not a merry pastime. She seemed to be somewhere else, in another world. She did not notice anyone. She did not respond to pleas to stop. Trophaea danced until her strength abandoned her, until she collapsed, her body writhing in convulsions, until she lay still. And yet she still saw no one, still answered no one. A few hours later, she rose again, and once more she began to dance. And so it went on for days. She did not sleep. She did not eat. She did not drink. She did not stop. But this was not the most astonishing part. After several days, other women began to dance with her. Then men joined them, and soon there were dozens of people. A chronicler wrote that they jumped, they leaped, they did not eat, they did not drink, they did not sleep until they fell unconscious. Within 2 weeks, nearly 400 people were dancing in the streets of Strasbourg. It is said that some of them died from exhaustion. The famous German poet of that time, Sebastian Brandt, later wrote that on certain days, up to 15 people died. What was this? What was happening in Strasbourg in that summer of 1518? Today, historians call this terrible phenomenon, like choreomania, the dancing mania. But in the 16th century, no one had any idea what it was. Strasbourg of the 16th century was a prosperous city. There were printing presses, a university, markets, wealthy houses. But the mood was uneasy, even fearful. The harvests of the previous years had failed. The price of food had risen sharply. And nearby, yet another outbreak of plague had begun. And it was not only about life in the city. The early 16th century was an anxious time. Old traditions were collapsing, the guild systems breaking down, peasant communities disintegrating, those very structures that for centuries had bound people together and enabled them to weather every storm. The discovery of America had suddenly changed everything. Suddenly there were lands on this earth not mentioned in the Bible at all. The economy was changing rapidly. Some became rich, others fell into poverty. Life felt less and less stable. And criticism of the church grew louder and louder. Less than a year before the dancing began, in the town of Wittenberg, an obscure monk and scholar named Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to a church door, condemning the sale of indulgences, the buying of forgiveness with money. When so much is happening around you, when everything is changing so fast, it is easy to believe preachers who say that the end of the world is near. And maybe these wild dances, maybe they too were a sign of the approaching catastrophe. In Strasbourg, the city council gathered urgently. The doctors explained that the frenzied dancing was caused by overheated blood. And how should one treat overheated blood? By letting the body dance it out. And so, in the very center of the city, on the marketplace, opposite the town hall, a wooden stage was built. Musicians were hired to play continuously, and the dancing went on. The chronicle says, they screamed, they trembled, their bodies shook in agonies, but the music never ceased. And soon something even stranger happened. Among those who came merely to watch or to stop the dancers, madness spread to them too, and they also began to dance. And then another thought arose. Perhaps this was a curse. Perhaps this was the devil's work. The music stopped. The wild dance must be fought in another way. In the Middle Ages, one saint was especially popular, Saint Vitus. Historians know little about him. Most likely he was killed in ancient Rome for refusing to renounce Christianity. But legend tells that he was a 7-year-old boy who bravely endured persuasion, threats, and even torture, performed miracles, among them the healing of the son of Emperor Diocletian, and afterward became the patron of dancers and entertainers, and also a healer of seizures and illnesses. In Germany, people believed that if you danced before the statue of St. Vitus, you could be cured. But if the saint was angered, you would dance forever. It is no accident that the disease we now call chorea, where the patient makes uncontrollable jerking movements, is still often called St. Vitus's dance. And so, only St. Vitus could help the dancers. City authorities ordered the exhausted, half-delirious people to be loaded onto wagons and taken to the town of Severn, where a chapel of St. Vitus stood. There they were dressed in special red shoes, decorated with consecrated crosses. Their feet were anointed with holy oil. They were led before the statue of St. Vitus, and a priest recited a prayer. Some of the sufferers found relief. The chronicler wrote, "After the pilgrimage to St. Vitus, many returned with cleansed souls and danced no more." By September, no one in Strasbourg was dancing. The epidemic had ended. But what had truly happened? In the 20th century, historians, neurologists, sociologists, and psychiatrists all tried to explain it. Was it a disease? Was it poisoning? Was it a collective ritual? Was it madness? One theory, the first, was poisoning by ergot. Ergot is a fungus that infects rye. It contains poisonous alkaloids, ergotamines, which can cause hallucinations and convulsions. This is how ergotism begins. And because in 16th century Europe people often ate rye infected with ergot, ergotism was common. It sounds logical. And yet under the influence of ergot, no one begins to dance. Ergot brings spasms, convulsions, numbness, gangrene. You cannot dance when your limbs are numb and rotting. And in Strasbourg, judging from the descriptions, the dancers did not have symptoms of food poisoning. They did not develop gangrene. So it was not ergot. The second theory was religious ecstasy. According to this version, the dance was a form of trance, a religious rite. Some even supposed that Trophea and the others might have belonged to a secret brotherhood, heirs of medieval cults of St. Vitus. The dance could have been a prayer, a purification, an act of penance. Indeed, Europe had seen holy dances in Germany, in Bohemia, in Italy. There were people who fell into trance, into ecstasy, accompanied by tears, by moans, by rhythmic movement. But in Strasbourg, nothing of the sort is recorded. No sects, no communities, no leaders calling people into the streets. Trophea was not known to belong to any society. No one preached, no one summoned. So this version too does not explain the epidemic. The third theory is the one most accepted today. It is the theory of mass psychogenic illness. In simpler words, mass hysteria. The British historian John Waller, a specialist in the social history of medicine, conducted years of research. He read city archives, letters, medical treatises, climate data, court documents, and he came to the conclusion that the dance was not possession. It was a scream, an unconscious, painful, physical way to express what could not otherwise be endured. At that time, the people of Strasbourg were under unbearable strain. Famine had led to hunger. Plague and other diseases sharpened the fear of death. And famine and disease in the worldview of the time did not come for no reason. They meant punishment, guilt, sin. People felt guilty, sinful, condemned. In such conditions, the mind could break. Waller believed that Trophea truly suffered. Perhaps she had trauma. Perhaps she had depression. Perhaps what she experienced burst forth in her strange dance. If we knew more of her life, maybe we could confirm it. But in any case, the hypothesis sounds convincing. She tried to express with her body what she could not express with words. And the people around her, already tense, frightened, excited, responded. The reaction spread from one to another, and so the dance became a collective hysteria, a reaction to the inner torment of the city. Of course, one question arises: why only Strasbourg? Hunger, plague, instability existed elsewhere as well. But the answer seems to be this: the individual act of one woman was enough to trigger the many. This old story might seem impossible today. We have psychologists, we have therapists, we have antidepressants, we have ways to heal and calm the mind. And yet those events remind us of the fragility of the human psyche. Hunger and disease, war, fear, anxiety. These can destroy it. And then what lies hidden deep inside the soul bursts out, sometimes as a dance, sometimes as hatred, sometimes as riots or insane decisions or violent acts. And it spreads, not to one, not to a few, but to hundreds, to thousands. Or should we say not can spread, but does. Hysteria is contagious. Fear and panic move swiftly. And then the world is overtaken by the dance of St. Vitus. in one form or another. Trophia, the woman who began to dance, the red shoes, the musicians playing for those who no longer had the strength to stop. What is this? A legend? No, it is a true story, confirmed by many, many sources. Why did a terrifying fairy tale turn into reality? How was such a thing possible? Our fears can take many forms. Sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, they take the form of wild, unstoppable dancing. And that is true not only of the 16th century, it is true of us as well.